Okay, so picture this. I'm Emily, 28 years old, ridiculously in love with my husband, James, and about to pop out our first kid. Life was good, like winning the lottery and quitting your job, good. We had the whole nine yards, the gorgeous house in the suburbs, the fancy cars, the kind of life you see in those cheesy family movies. James, my husband, was basically Prince Charming in a tailored suit. He was kind, successful, and completely smitten with me. And let's be honest, my killer lasagna recipe. We were that couple everyone secretly hated because we were just so damn happy. Em? James would say, his hand resting on my giant baby bump. I can't wait to meet our little one. I just know they're going to be amazing. Me too, I'd reply, beaming. Although I'm hoping they inherit your brains and my sense of humor. Can you imagine the pranks we could pull? He'd laugh, that deep, rumbling laugh that always made my heart melt. As long as they don't inherit your cooking skills, he'd tease. I'm not sure the world is ready for another burnt casserole. I'd swat his arm playfully. Hey, I'm getting better. Besides, you'll eat anything I make, you love-struck fool. He'd grin, pulling me closer for a kiss. That's true, he'd admit. But seriously, Em, I'm so lucky to have you. You and our little bean are my whole world. Cue the awes. Seriously, we were sickeningly sweet. But of course, no fairy tale is complete without a villain. Enter my stepmother, Veronica. She was my dad's second wife. All designer labels and perfectly coiffed hair. She'd never liked me, probably because I was living proof that my dad had loved someone else before her. And her daughter, Tiffany, was basically a mini Veronica, all spoiled tantrums and designer handbags. Oh, Emily, darling, Veronica would say, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. You look well-fed. Are you sure you're not having twins? Just one, as far as we know, I'd reply, rolling my eyes. Unless you've got some secret ultrasound technology hidden in that Birkin bag of yours. She'd force a smile, her eyes flashing with a hint of something. Resentment, jealousy, maybe a touch of evil stepmother magic? Who knows? Anyway, the point is, Veronica and Tiffany weren't exactly thrilled about the upcoming addition to the family. They saw my baby as a threat, a rival for my dad's affection, and, let's be honest, a potential competitor for the inheritance. Just wait until the baby comes, Emily, Tiffany had sneered one day. Your perfect little life is about to fall apart. I dismissed her words as teenage angst, but looking back, maybe I should have paid more attention, because little did I know, Veronica had a plan. A twisted, evil plan that would shatter my happiness, tear my family apart, and send me spiraling into a darkness I never thought I'd escape. Okay, so labor was intense, like running a marathon while being kicked in the ribs by a tiny human. Intense. But after hours of sweat, tears, and some very unladylike screaming, my little bundle of joy arrived. A beautiful baby girl with James's eyes and thankfully my nose. She's perfect, I whispered, tears of joy streaming down my face as I held her close. She is, James agreed, his voice thick with emotion, just like her mama. We named her Lily, and for those first few hours, it was pure bliss. Just us, our little family, basking in the glow of new parenthood. But then, things took a turn. I started hemorrhaging, a complication the doctors hadn't anticipated. It was all a blur of panicked nurses, urgent whispers, and the terrifying feeling that I was slipping away. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a recovery room, groggy and disoriented. James was by my side, his face etched with worry. Em, he said, his voice filled with relief. You're okay. You scared the hell out of me. Lily? I croaked, my throat dry. Is she? She's fine, he said, his expression softening. Sleeping like an angel. Veronica's with her. Veronica, my heart sank. Why was she the one with my baby? Where was the nurse? A wave of unease washed over me, a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Later that evening, when I was finally able to hold Lily again, something felt off. She seemed smaller, her cries weaker, her features different, but I was exhausted, still recovering from the ordeal, and I dismissed my doubts as postpartum hormones. The next few days were a whirlwind of visitors, flowers, and well wishes, but Veronica was always there. hovering, observing, whispering little comments that chipped away at my confidence, my sanity. "She doesn't really look like either of you, does she?" she'd say, her eyes narrowed. "Such a unique little face." "She's just a newborn, Veronica," I'd snap, my patience wearing thin. "They all look a bit squishy at this stage." But her words lingered, planting seeds of doubt in my already fragile mind. And then came the subtle manipulations, the carefully crafted insinuations that poisoned James's thoughts, twisted his perceptions. "You know, Emily was spending a lot of time with that consultant, wasn't she?" she'd say to James, her voice a casual whisper. "He was quite charming." "Veronica, please," I'd protest, but she'd just smile sweetly and change the subject. The doubt grew, festering in James's mind like a poison. He became distant, withdrawn, his eyes filled with suspicion. He started working late, his phone glued to his ear, his excuses flimsy and unconvincing. "Who are you talking to?" I'd ask, my voice trembling. "Just work stuff, Em," he'd mumble, avoiding my gaze. The tension in our once happy home was thick enough to cut with a knife. The joy of new parenthood was replaced by suspicion, resentment, and a growing chasm between us. And then the bomb dropped. James came home one evening, his face pale, his jaw clenched. He held a piece of paper in his hand, the results of a DNA test. "Emily," he said, his voice shaking, This isn't my child." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of me. I stared at him, my mind reeling, my heart shattering into a million pieces. "What?" I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. That's impossible." "It's not," he said, his voice cold and hard. "The test is conclusive. Lily, she's not mine." I tried to explain, to protest, to tell him that there had to be some mistake, but the words wouldn't come, choked by the lump of betrayal and despair that had lodged itself in my throat. He didn't believe me, of course. Why would he? Veronica had done her job well, poisoning his mind, twisting the truth, making him doubt my love, my loyalty, my very sanity. And as I watched him walk out the door, our little Lily cradled in his arms, my world crumbled around me. I had lost everything, my husband, my child, my happiness. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that Veronica was behind it all. Okay, so the DNA test was like a giant fuck you from the universe. I mean, I'd always thought those things were foolproof, the kind of evidence that could solve crimes and reunite long-lost relatives. But in my case, it was the weapon that destroyed my life. James, bless his logical lawyer brain, wouldn't even entertain the idea of a mistake. "The lab is reputable, Emily," he'd said, his voice cold and distant. "There's no room for error." But how?" I'd stammered, my mind racing. "I've never been with anyone else, James. You know that." He just stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Don't insult my intelligence, Emily," he'd said, his voice laced with bitterness. "Do you really expect me to believe that?" I tried to explain, to reason, to appeal to the years of love and trust we'd shared. But it was like talking to a brick wall. Veronica's poison had seeped deep into his veins, twisting his perceptions, blinding him to the truth. "Please, James," I'd begged, tears streaming down my face. "You have to believe me. I'd never betray you, never." But he wouldn't listen. He'd already made up his mind, convinced that I was a liar, a cheat, a woman unworthy of his love and trust. The divorce was brutal. He hired the best lawyers, the kind who could make the devil himself look innocent. I was painted as an adulteress, a manipulator, a woman who deliberately deceived her husband and brought shame upon their family. My own father, blinded by Veronica's influence and his own grief over the betrayal, turned his back on me. "Emily," he'd said, his voice filled with disappointment, "I thought I knew you. I thought I could trust you." "Dad, please," I'd pleaded. "You have to believe me. I'd never do this to you, to James, to our family." But he wouldn't hear it. He'd already chosen sides, aligning himself with the woman who'd poisoned his mind and stolen his daughter's happiness. I lost everything, my husband, my home, my reputation, even my own father's love. I was alone. adrift in a sea of despair with no one to turn to, no one to believe me. And as I sat in my empty apartment, the divorce papers mocking me from the coffee table, I felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me. I was defeated, broken, a shell of the woman I once was. The only thing I had left was Lily, my beautiful, precious Lily, who wasn't really mine, but who was the only reminder of the life I'd lost, the happiness that had been stolen from me. I held her close, her soft cries echoing in the silence, her tiny hand gripping my finger with surprising strength. And in that moment, I knew I had to fight, not for myself, not for James, but for Lily, for the child who was rightfully mine, the child who had been stolen from me, the child I would do anything to get back. Okay, so with the divorce finalized and my life basically in shambles, I knew I had to confront Veronica. I stormed into her perfectly manicured living room, my anger a burning inferno that threatened to consume me. Veronica, I spat, my voice shaking with rage. You did this. You stole my baby. You poisoned James's mind. You destroyed my life. She smirked, her eyes gleaming with a chilling satisfaction. My, Emily, she purred. Aren't we dramatic? Whatever are you talking about? Don't play coy with me, I snarled, my fists clenched. I know you switched the babies. I know you manipulated James. I know you're behind all of this. She laughed, a cold, cruel sound that sent shivers down my spine. Oh, Emily, darling, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. You're so naive. You really think I'd go to such lengths just to, what, sabotage your marriage? Yes, I shouted, my voice cracking. You've always hated me. You've always been jealous of my relationship with Dad, of my happiness, of everything I have. She stood up, her eyes blazing with a venomous hatred I'd never seen before. You're right, Emily, she hissed. I do hate you. You and your perfect life, your perfect husband, your perfect little baby. You've always had everything handed to you on a silver platter, while Tiffany and I have had to fight for every scrap of attention, every ounce of love. That's not true, I protested, my voice trembling. Dad loves you both. He's always been there for you. He's never loved me the way he loves you, she spat, her voice filled with bitterness. And he certainly doesn't love Tiffany the way he loves that bastard child of yours. She's not a bastard, I shouted, my anger flaring. She's my daughter, and you have no right to talk about her like that. Oh, but she's not your daughter, is she, Emily? Veronica sneered, her smile widening. She's mine. Or rather, she's no one's. A nameless, faceless child who will never know her true parents. Thanks to you. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. I switched the babies, Emily, she confessed, her voice filled with a chilling triumph. I made sure your precious little Lily would be raised by strangers while you're left with a child that's not even yours. And the best part? No one will ever believe you. They'll all think you're crazy, just like your dear husband. I stared at her, my mind reeling, my heart shattering into a million pieces. She was right. No one would believe me. I had no proof, no evidence, nothing but my own word against hers. I sank to the floor, my body trembling, my tears flowing freely. I had lost everything. My husband, my child, my family, my sanity. And there was nothing I could do about it. Veronica stood over me, her eyes gleaming with a cruel satisfaction. You're pathetic, Emily, she sneered. A weak, pathetic little girl who couldn't even protect her own child. You deserve everything that's happened to you. She turned and walked away, her laughter echoing in the silence. A chilling reminder of my defeat, my despair, my utter helplessness. I was broken, lost, adrift in a sea of grief and anger with no land in sight, and as I lay there, sobbing uncontrollably, I wished I could just disappear, fade away, cease to exist. Okay, so after that confrontation with Veronica, I was a wreck, like Walking Dead extra in a zombie movie kind of wreck. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't even function. All I could do was cry, scream, and curse the universe for my cruel fate. James had taken Lily, who I now knew wasn't really mine, and moved in with his parents. He wouldn't let me see her, wouldn't even answer my calls. My lawyer said it was for the best, that I needed to focus on healing. But all I wanted was to hold my baby, to smell her sweet scent, to feel the warmth of her tiny body against mine. My dad, bless his clueless heart, tried to be supportive, but he was too wrapped up in Veronica's web of lies to truly understand. Emily, darling, he'd say, his voice filled with concern, you need to move on. James has made his decision, and you need to respect that. But he's wrong, I'd cry, my voice raw with despair. He doesn't understand Veronica, But I couldn't tell him the truth. He wouldn't believe me. He'd just think I was delusional, grasping at straws, trying to deflect blame from my own mistakes. My friends, the ones who hadn't already abandoned me after the divorce, tried to be there for me, but their words of comfort felt hollow, meaningless. You'll get through this, Em. They'd say, their eyes filled with pity. You're strong. You'll find love again. But I didn't want another love. I wanted James. I wanted my baby. I wanted my life back. I spent my days wandering aimlessly through the streets, haunted by the ghost of my former happiness. I'd see mothers pushing strollers, their faces glowing with maternal love, and my heart would ache with a longing so intense it was almost unbearable. I tried to find my real child, the one Veronica had stolen from me. I hired private investigators, scoured birth records, even resorted to posting flyers in hospitals and clinics, my face plastered with a desperate plea for information. Have you seen this baby? The flyers read, a picture of Lily, or rather the baby I thought was Lily, smiling up at the camera. She was taken from her mother shortly after birth. Any information, no matter how small, could help reunite this family. But it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Veronica had covered her tracks well, leaving no trace, no clue, no hope. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and the despair grew heavier, darker, more suffocating. I was drowning in grief, consumed by a loneliness that gnawed at my soul. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Suicide? Really? Isn't that a bit extreme? But when you're drowning in despair, when the pain is so intense it feels like your soul is being ripped apart, when you see no other way out, well, extreme starts to look like the only option. I was exhausted. Exhausted from crying, exhausted from fighting, exhausted from trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly turned cruel and senseless. I'd lost everything. My husband, my child, my family, my sense of self. What was the point of going on? I tried to be strong, to put on a brave face for my friends, for my dad, but inside, I was crumbling, falling apart, piece by piece. The world seemed muted, the colors faded, the laughter and chatter a distant hum. I was a ghost haunting my own life, a shadow of the woman I once was. Emily, you need to eat, Sarah would say, her voice filled with concern. You're wasting away. I'm not hungry, I'd mumble, pushing the food away. But you haven't eaten in days, she'd protest. I'm just not feeling it, I'd say, forcing a smile. But the truth was, I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want to do anything. All I wanted was to escape the pain, the emptiness, the crushing weight of despair that threatened to suffocate me. I started thinking about ending it all. Not in a dramatic, attention-seeking way, but in a quiet, desperate attempt to find some peace, some release. I imagined slipping away, fading into the darkness, leaving behind the pain, the heartbreak, the shattered dreams. It seemed like the only way out, the only way to silence the voices in my head, the only way to stop the tears that wouldn't stop flowing. I wrote a letter to my dad, pouring out my heart, explaining everything. I told him about Veronica's lies, about the baby switch, about the despair that had consumed me. I'm sorry, Dad, I wrote, my hand trembling. I didn't want to do this, but I can't go on anymore. Please forgive me. I left the letter on my bedside table, along with a picture of James and me, our faces beaming with happiness, a cruel reminder of the life I'd lost. Then I went to the bathroom, filled the tub with warm water, and added a bottle of lavender bath salts, a futile attempt to find some comfort, some solace in the familiar scent. I slipped into the water, the warmth enveloping me like a shroud. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness consume me. the silence washing over me like a wave. And as I drifted away, I thought of Lily, my precious baby girl, the one I'd never truly known, the one I'd never be able to hold again. I'm sorry, Lily, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I failed you, but I love you. I'll always love you. And then the darkness took me, swallowing me whole, erasing the pain, the heartbreak, the memories that haunted me. I was free, or so I thought. Okay, so imagine waking up in your own bed, the sunlight streaming through the window, the birds chirping merrily outside, except, you were pretty sure you just, well, ended it all. Yeah, talk about a mind fuck. I sat up, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. Was I dreaming, hallucinating? Had I somehow survived the incident? But how? Why? I looked around the room. Everything familiar yet strangely different. The floral wallpaper, the antique dresser, the framed photo of James and me on our honeymoon. It was all the same. Yet somehow sharper, brighter, more vibrant. I stumbled out of bed, my legs shaky, my head spinning. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and my breath hitched. My eyes were clearer, my skin brighter, my hair looked like it had just had a professional blowout. What the hell was going on? I wandered into the kitchen, where James was making breakfast, his back to me. He was humming a cheerful tune, his shoulders relaxed, his movements carefree. It was like watching a scene from a movie, a flashback to a happier time, a time before the betrayal, the heartbreak, the despair. James, I called out, my voice trembling. He turned, his face breaking into a wide smile. You're up. I was just about to bring you breakfast in bed. How are you feeling? I don't know, I stammered, my mind still struggling to process the situation. What day is it? He chuckled. It's Saturday, silly. Don't tell me you've lost track of time already. You're due any day now, you know? Due any day now? My eyes widened in realization. It was the week before the birth, the week before everything went to hell, the week before Veronica, the DNA test, the divorce, the end. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly giving way. It was a second chance, a do-over, a chance to rewrite the past, to prevent the pain, to save my family, my child, my sanity. Are you okay? James asked, his voice filled with concern. You look a little pale. I'm fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just a little overwhelmed. Hormones and all that. He nodded, his expression softening. Of course. Well, try to relax. We have a big day ahead of us. Dr. Evans wants to see you for a final checkup. I nodded, my mind racing. I had a week. 1 week to figure out a plan, to gather evidence, to expose Veronica and her twisted scheme. 1 week to save my life, my family, my happiness. And as I looked at James, his eyes filled with love and anticipation, I knew I wouldn't waste it. This time, I would be ready. This time, I would fight back. This time, I would win. Okay, so being reborn is weird. Like, did I eat a bad taco or am I actually reliving my life? Kind of weird. But once the initial shock wore off, I knew I had to get my shit together. This was my chance to rewrite history, to expose Veronica's evil scheme, and to save my family from imploding. First things first, I had to prove that baby switch actually happened. Last time around, I'd been so out of it from the blood loss and the general trauma of childbirth that I hadn't really noticed the difference until it was too late. This time, I was going in with my eyes wide open. James, I said casually, a few days before my due date, do you think we could maybe, get a camera for the nursery? Just so we can keep an eye on the little one when we're not there. He looked at me like I'd sprouted a second head. Are you serious? They have nurses for that. And besides, who's going to be sneaking into the hospital nursery to steal babies? I don't know, I said, shrugging. It's just, I've been reading all these stories online about baby mix-ups and hospital kidnappings, and it's kind of freaking me out. He chuckled, pulling me close for a hug. Don't worry, Em. Our little bean will be safe and sound. I promise. Famous last words, buddy. But I played along, acting like the paranoid hormonal pregnant lady. Meanwhile, I was secretly ordering the most discreet, high-tech nanny cam I could find online. This thing was tiny, practically invisible, with night vision, motion detection, and enough storage to record a whole season of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Not that I watch that trash, but you get the point. Next, I had to figure out how to catch Veronica red-handed. She was sneaky, manipulative, and always had an alibi. I needed to create a situation where she'd feel confident enough to make her move, while I had undeniable proof of her actions. "James," I said a few hours after Lily was born, the real Lily this time, "I'm exhausted. Could you maybe take her to the nursery for a few hours? I just need to close my eyes for a bit." He hesitated, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you sure, Em? You just gave birth. Shouldn't you be resting?" "I will," I said, forcing a yawn. "But I can't relax with her crying. Just a few hours, please. I'll be fine." He finally agreed, kissing me on the forehead before carefully carrying Lily out of the room. As soon as the door closed behind him, I sprang into action. I checked the camera feed on my phone, making sure it was positioned perfectly to capture the entire nursery. Then, I called my dad. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling with fake exhaustion, "I'm not feeling well. Could you maybe come to the hospital and sit with me for a while? James is with Lily, but I just need someone here." He agreed, of course. He was putty in my hands, especially when I played the damsel in distress card. And I knew Veronica wouldn't be far behind. She'd never miss an opportunity to gloat, to witness my vulnerability, to revel in my supposed misery. I settled back into the bed, feigning exhaustion, my heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. The trap was set, the bait was laid, and now, all I had to do was wait. The next few hours were agonizing. I pretended to doze, my ears straining for any sound, my eyes darting to the camera feed every few minutes. Finally, the door creaked open, and Veronica's perfectly coiffed head appeared in the doorway. "Emily, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with fake concern. "How are you feeling?" "Terrible," I groaned, burying my face in the pillow. "I think I'm going to be sick." She tutted sympathetically, her eyes gleaming with a malicious glint. "Oh, you poor dear. Well, don't worry. I'll take care of everything." And with that, she turned and left the room. I waited a few minutes, my heart pounding in my chest. Then grabbed my phone and checked the camera feed. There she was, Veronica, dressed in a nurse's uniform, her face a mask of cold determination as she approached Lily's crib. I watched in horror as she expertly swapped my baby with another, her movements swift and practiced, her expression chillingly calm. I felt a surge of rage, a wave of nausea, a desperate urge to scream, to confront her, to tear her apart with my bare hands. But I held back, my mind focused on the plan. I needed proof, undeniable evidence that would expose her lies and reclaim my child. And as I watched the recording, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and triumph, I knew that I had it. I had the evidence I needed to bring Veronica down, to save my family, to reclaim my life. The game was on, and this time, I was winning. Okay, so with the incriminating footage burning a hole in my phone, I waited. It wasn't long before the whole family circus arrived at my hospital room. My dad, looking bewildered and concerned, Veronica with her signature smirk plastered on her face, and Tiffany rolling her eyes like this was all a major inconvenience to her manicure schedule. And of course, James, his jaw tight, his eyes filled with a suspicion that made my stomach churn. Veronica, never one to miss an opportunity, launched into her performance the moment she stepped through the door. "Oh, Emily, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You look absolutely dreadful. Are you sure you're up for visitors?" "I'm fine," I said flatly, my eyes fixed on James. He avoided my gaze, his discomfort palpable. "Well, we just wanted to check on you and the little one," Veronica continued, her smile widening. "James has been telling us such wonderful things about her. Apparently, she's the spitting image of, well, let's just say she has her father's eyes." I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my voice steady. "She does, doesn't she?" I said, my eyes narrowing. James shifted uncomfortably, his face flushing. "Veronica, maybe we should let Emily rest," he mumbled. Nonsense, darling, Veronica said, patting his arm. A little family time is just what the doctor ordered. She turned to my dad, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You know, Richard, it's quite remarkable how much she resembles a certain consultant Emily was spending a lot of time with before the birth. My dad's eyebrows shot up, his eyes widening with alarm. Emily? Is there something you need to tell us? No, I said, my voice rising. There's nothing to tell. Veronica is just trying to. But before I could finish, the door swung open and a nurse bustled in, carrying a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. Here's your little princess, she chirped, handing the baby to me. She's been quite the fuss budget in the nursery. Someone missed her mommy. I looked down at the baby, my heart pounding in my chest. She was beautiful, with big blue eyes and a tuft of dark hair. But she wasn't mine. This wasn't Lily. Wait, I said, my voice trembling. This isn't my baby. The room went silent. Everyone stared at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Emily, what are you talking about? James asked, his voice sharp. Of course she's your baby. You just gave birth to her. No, I didn't, I said, my voice rising. This isn't Lily. Someone switched the babies. Veronica let out a gasp, her hand flying to her chest. Emily, how dare you accuse someone of such a thing? You're clearly still delirious from the medication. I'm not delirious, I said, my voice firm. I know what I saw. I know what happened. I turned to my dad, my eyes pleading with him to believe me. Dad, please, you have to trust me. Someone switched the babies. I don't know who, but... Emily, he said, his voice stern. This is getting out of hand. You need to calm down and... No, I shouted, my patience snapping. I won't calm down. I won't be silenced. I won't let anyone take my baby from me again. I stood up, my body trembling with rage, my eyes fixed on Veronica. You did this, didn't you? I accused, my voice shaking. You switched the babies. You're the reason James doesn't believe me. You're the reason my life is falling apart. She gasped, her face paling. Emily, how dare you? I would never... Don't lie to me, I screamed, my voice echoing through the room. I have proof. I saw you. I saw everything. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I navigated to the video recording. I held it up for everyone to see, the incriminating footage playing on the screen. The room was silent as they watched Veronica, dressed in a nurse's uniform, calmly and methodically switching the babies. The silence was shattered by James's gasp of horror. He stared at the screen, his face pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. He turned to Veronica, his voice shaking with rage. You did this? He choked out. You. He couldn't even finish the sentence, his anger and betrayal too overwhelming. He turned and stormed out of the room, his footsteps echoing in the silence. My dad, his face etched with shock and shame, looked at Veronica, his voice trembling. Veronica? Is this true? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just stood there, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously around the room, the mask of innocence finally shattered, revealing the cruel, manipulative woman beneath. I felt a surge of triumph, a wave of relief washing over me. The truth was out. Veronica had been exposed, her lies laid bare for all to see. And as I looked at her, her face contorted with a mixture of fear and defeat, I knew that I had won. I had reclaimed my child, my husband, my life, and nothing, not even Veronica's twisted scheme, could ever take that away from me again. Okay, so the look on Veronica's face when she realized she'd been caught, priceless. It was like watching a balloon deflate, all that smug confidence whooshing out of her like air from a punctured tire. She sputtered, stammered, tried to deny it, but the evidence was right there on the screen, undeniable and damning. That's not me, she shrieked, her voice cracking. It's a fake. Someone's trying to frame me. But no one was buying it. My dad, his face a mask of betrayal and disgust, just shook his head. Tiffany, for once, was speechless, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fear. And James? Well, James looked like he wanted to strangle Veronica with his bare hands. You bitch! He roared, his voice trembling with rage. You wanted to ruin my life. You fed me lies about Emily cheating, and you wanted to take my daughter away from me. He lunged towards Veronica, but I grabbed his arm, pulling him back. James, no! I said, my voice firm. Let her get to you. We need to stay calm. Call the police. Let them handle this. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving, his fists clenched. You're right, he said, his voice strained. But I swear if I ever get my hands on her. I nodded, understanding his anger. I felt it too, a burning rage that threatened to consume me. But I knew I couldn't let it control me. I had to stay focused for Lily's sake, for my own sake. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. They arrived within minutes, sirens blaring, lights flashing, a welcome sight in the midst of the chaos. Veronica, still protesting her innocence, was arrested and led away in handcuffs, her perfectly coiffed hair now disheveled, her designer clothes rumpled, her mask of composure finally shattered. The aftermath was a blur of police interviews, hospital investigations, and tearful reunions. Lily, my precious baby girl, was returned to me, her soft cries filling my arms with a joy I thought I'd never experience again. James, his eyes filled with remorse and love, held us both close, his apologies pouring out like a flood. I'm so sorry, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I was a fool. I should have trusted you. I should have known. It's okay, James, I said, my voice choked with tears. It's over now. We're together. That's all that matters. My dad, his face etched with shame and regret, apologized for his blindness, for his misplaced trust in Veronica. Emily, darling, he said, his voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I failed you. I failed Lily. It's okay, Dad, I said, hugging him tightly. We're all going to be okay. The road to recovery wasn't easy. There were therapy sessions, trust exercises, and a whole lot of awkward conversations. But we got through it. Together. Our love, our bond, our family had been tested, but it had ultimately emerged stronger, more resilient, more precious than ever. And as for Veronica, well, let's just say she got what she deserved. She was charged with kidnapping, fraud, and a whole host of other crimes that could keep her behind bars for a very long time. Tiffany, stripped of her mother's influence and her lavish lifestyle, was forced to face the consequences of her own actions, a harsh but necessary reality check. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There were still challenges, still struggles, still moments of doubt and insecurity. But now, I had the tools, the strength, the resilience to face them head on. I had my family, my love, my happiness, and I knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic or reason, that nothing, not even the most twisted of schemes, could ever take that away from me again. So yeah, that's my story. The story of how I died, was reborn, and ultimately triumphed over adversity. It's a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and despair, but also a story of love, resilience, and the unwavering power of the human spirit. And as I look at my beautiful Lily, her eyes sparkling with laughter, her tiny hand reaching for mine, I know that I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Because in the end, it wasn't just about reclaiming my child, my life, my happiness. It was about finding myself, my strength, my voice. And that, my friends, is the greatest victory of all.